She's kidnapping the baby guards. Stop her, Sofia Martinez froze. Her arms were full of a shivering, barely breathing 4-year-old girl she had just dragged out of a dumpster with her bare hands. And now a woman was screaming that she was a kidnapper. The rain hammered down. The floodlights exploded on. Armed guards came running from every direction, guns already raised. And Sofia stood there in the middle of it all, soaking wet, holding a dying child against her chest, thinking I saved her. I saved this little girl. So why did it feel like she had just made the worst mistake of her life? Subscribe to our channel, hit that bell, and drop the name of your city in the comments. Right now, I want to see exactly how far this story travels. Sofia Martinez had spent 11 years learning how to disappear. Not literally, but close enough. She had spent 11 years moving through expensive rooms without touching anything, answering questions, without offering opinions, existing in the margins of other people's lives, with such practiced quietness that most of the people she worked for couldn't have picked her face out of a lineup. She was the woman who folded your towels and vanished. The woman who refilled your coffee before you noticed it was empty. The woman whose name you almost remembered sometimes on the rare occasion you needed something done. She was Sofia Martinez, and she was nobody. Or that was what she had told herself for 11 years every single morning before she pinned on her name tag and got to work. She wasn't thinking about any of that on the night everything changed. She was thinking about a cup of instant coffee and a 12:15 bus, and whether her mother had remembered to take the 8 o'clock pill. She was dragging the last garbage bag of the evening across the wet cobblestones at the back of the Romano estate, head down against the rain moving fast because she was tired and cold, and the storm had been getting worse by the hour. The Romano estate was not the kind of place that tolerated mess. The garbage bins were industrial size, bolted into a row along the far service wall, and Sofia had been emptying them at the end of every shift for 2.5 years without incident. She knew the weight of each lid. She knew the particular metallic clang they made when you let them drop. She knew by smell alone which bin had been used last. She swung the lid of the second bin open, raised her bag, and stopped. The smell hit her first. Something sweet and chemical buried underneath the usual rot. Wrong, out of place in the way that certain things are out of place in the dark. Not just unexpected, but alarming the way your body registers wrongness a full second before your mind catches up. She leaned in closer, and her heart fell out of her chest. A foot, a tiny bare foot, pale as chalk, the toes curled slightly inward, the way a child's toes curl when they sleep, barely visible beneath a black garbage bag that someone had tossed on top. No, Sofia whispered. She wasn't thinking. She stopped thinking entirely. She reached in with both arms, shoved the bag aside, and what she found underneath it broke something open in her that she would never quite be able to close again. A little girl, 4 years old maybe. Dark curls matted flat against her forehead from the cold and the damp. Lips the color of a bruised blue-gray, bloodless. Skin ice cold to the touch. She was wearing a white nightgown with tiny embroidered flowers at the collar. Sofia registered that detail with the strange hyperclarity of shock, and the nightgown was soaked through and filthy, and the little girl was not moving. But she was breathing. Barely. In shallow, uneven sips of air. Sofia grabbed her and pulled her up and out of that bin in one desperate motion, hauling her against her chest and wrapping both arms around her as tight as she dared, trying to transfer whatever warmth she had left in her own body into this small, cold, limp little person. "I've got you," she said, and her voice was shaking so hard she barely recognized it as her own. "I've got you, sweetheart. You're okay. You're okay. Help, somebody help me. I need help out here right now." She spun around screaming into the rain, and that was when she saw Ivy Russo. The nanny was standing 15 feet away, dry under a black umbrella shoes, spotless on the wet cobblestones, watching Sofia with an expression that made absolutely no sense. Not panic, not relief, not the frantic forward-lunging urgency of someone who had just realized a child they were responsible for was alive and needed help. Just watching. "Ivy, thank God," Sofia started toward her. "She was in the bin. She needs a hospital right now. She's hypothermic. We have to—" "Stop." Ivy's voice came out flat and final like a door slamming shut. "Don't move." Sofia froze. "What?" I said, "Stop moving." And then Ivy raised her hand, a single deliberate gesture, and two armed guards materialized from the shadows on either side of the yard. Guns out, moving fast towards Sophia. "What are you—" Sophia pressed the little girl tighter against her chest instinctively. "What is happening right now? I saw what you were doing." Ivy's voice shifted louder now, pitched for the guards for anyone who might be listening. "I came outside and I saw you. You had the child in your arms and you were moving toward the rear gate." The words didn't make sense for a full second. Sophia's brain refused to assemble them into meaning. Then they did make sense, and the bottom dropped out of her stomach. "I was taking her out of the garbage," Sophia said. Her voice came out strange, low, like she was speaking from somewhere underwater. "She was inside the bin, buried. Someone put her in there." "That's not what I saw." "That's not what you—" "Oh." Sophia stared at her. "Ivy, she was in the bin. She still has the lid marks on her. Look at her. She's barely—" "Take the child," Ivy said to the guard on her right. "Don't you touch her." Sophia stepped back. Her heel hit the cobblestone wrong, and she stumbled, catching herself clutching the little girl harder. "She's not stable. She's not breathing right. If you just grab her, you could—" The second guard closed his hands around Sophia's arms from behind. She wrenched sideways. "Get off me!" And the first guard stepped in and peeled the child out of her grip with practiced impersonal efficiency. The little girl whimpered at the separation, one small broken sound, and Sophia lunged toward her. "Be careful, please. She's sick." And the guard behind her yanked her back so hard her feet nearly left the ground. "Call Mr. Romano," Ivy said. Still that same flat, controlled voice. Still that same expression that was almost nothing. "Tell him we found the maid attempting to remove Lily from the property." Sophia stopped struggling. Not because she gave up, because something colder and more dangerous than panic had moved in behind her eyes. She looked at Ivy. Ivy looked back at her. "You know exactly what happened," Sophia said quietly enough that only Ivy could hear it. "And you're doing this anyway." For 1 second, one single unguarded second, something flickered across Ivy Russo's face. Not guilt, not quite. Something more like acknowledgement. "Yes, I know. And so what?" Then the mask came back down, smooth and seamless. "You should have stayed invisible," Ivy said softly. And then the floodlights came on. All of them simultaneously blazing to life around the perimeter and flooding the yard with a light so sudden and brutal that Sophia flinched against it. And in the new brightness, she heard the footsteps, unhurried, heavy, deliberate, coming from the direction of the main house. She knew who it was before she turned around. She could read it in the way the guard's body shifted, the way Ivy's chin lifted slightly and her shoulders settled back, the way the temperature of the entire yard seemed to drop another 5 degrees. Alexander Romano did not look the way powerful men are supposed to look in stories. He didn't sweep in. He didn't shout. He simply walked into the light and stood there in a dark shirt with his sleeves rolled to his elbows despite the rain, and looked at the scene in front of him with dark, contained eyes that gave away nothing and took in everything. He looked at Ivy, at the guard holding Lily, at Sophia, at Lily again. He crossed to the guard in 4 steps and put his hand against his daughter's face, a brief controlled touch, the back of 2 fingers against her cheek, and something moved through his expression that was large and violent and completely invisible. If you weren't watching closely, you would have missed it. Sophia was watching closely. What happened to her? His voice was very quiet, almost gentle, the kind of gentle that is the outermost layer of something that is not gentle at all. "Sir?" Ivy moved forward, professional, smooth. "I'm so sorry. I came outside and found the maid Martinez. She had Lily in her arms. She was moving toward the service gate. I called the guards immediately." Alexander looked at Ivy for 3 full seconds. Then he moved his gaze to Sophia. "Is that what happened?" Sophia was afraid. She was more afraid than she had been in a very long time. She could feel her own heartbeat in her fingertips, and the muscles of her legs wanted badly to take a step backward. She didn't let them. "No," she said. "Your daughter was in that dumpster." She tilted her head toward the open bin. "Second one on the left. She was buried under a garbage bag. She'd been given something, I could smell it on her, something chemical sweet. She was unconscious and hypothermic." I pulled her out and I screamed for help. She paused. Asked the guards what they heard before they came outside. The silence that followed had a physical quality, like pressure, like the moment before something breaks. Alexander turned slightly toward the guard on his left. Emilio. Emilio was perhaps 45, broad-shouldered, with the face of a man who had learned long ago to be careful with words. He hesitated not long, a fraction of a breath, and in that fraction, Sophia could see the calculation happening, the weighing, the fear. "We heard her shouting, sir," he said finally, "before we came outside." Alexander said nothing. He looked at the dumpster. He looked at Lily, still unconscious in the guard's arms, still pale, still small. He looked back at Sophia. "You anticipated the question about the guards," he said. "Yes." "Why?" "Because I knew the moment Ivy opened her mouth that I'd need to be able to answer it." Something shifted in his face. Not warmth, something more like a recalibration, the adjustment of a very precise instrument. "You're not afraid of me," he said, and it was less a question than an observation made with mild curiosity. "I'm very afraid of you," Sophia said, "but fear doesn't change what's true." He held her gaze for one more beat. "Then get Dr. Marchetti here. Now." To the guard holding Lily, "Take her to her room carefully." To the other guard, "East parlor." He looked at Sophia last. "Stay there until I come to you." He turned and walked back inside. Ivy started to follow him, and as she passed Sophia, she didn't look at her, didn't slow down, didn't acknowledge her in any way. She walked past as if Sophia had already ceased to exist, which was, Sophia thought, probably exactly how Ivy preferred it. The East parlor was built to make people uncomfortable. High cold ceilings, furniture that looked expensive and felt like sitting on a judgment, a fireplace that hadn't been lit. Sophia sat in a chair and pressed her palms flat against her thighs and breathed deliberately in and out 4 counts each way and made herself think. Not about her fear, not about the guards or the guns or the way Alexander Romano's eyes had moved over her like a scanner. About what she knew. What she knew was this: someone had drugged a 4-year-old child and hidden her in a garbage bin on a freezing night. Someone had planned for her not to be found until it was too late. And Ivy Russo had been outside in the rain with dry shoes, with a prepared accusation already loaded and ready to fire. Not a witness, not a panicking bystander, not someone who had stumbled onto the scene. A person who had been waiting for it. The implication was a cold weight in Sophia's chest that she couldn't put down. 40 minutes passed. The door opened. Alexander came in alone. He stood by the unlit fireplace. He didn't sit. He looked at her the way you look at something you haven't yet decided what to do with. "The doctor says she was given chloral hydrate," he said, "enough to keep her unconscious for 8 to 10 hours. She was in that bin for approximately 45 minutes. A pause. In those temperatures, another 20 minutes and she would have gone into severe hypothermia. You found her in time." "Good," Sophia said. Something moved in his face. "Good," he repeated almost to himself, like he was tasting the word and finding it strange. "You pulled my daughter out of a garbage bin in the rain, and all you have to say is good." "She's alive," Sophia said. "That's what matters." He was quiet for a moment. "How long have you worked here?" 2 years and 4 months. "And in that time, have you had any interactions with my daughter? Any unsupervised access to her?" "No. I work the kitchen and the lower floor. Lily's rooms are on the 2nd floor. I have never been assigned there." "Have you had any conflict with Ivy Russo?" Sophia paused. Not long, but he noticed. "She corrected my work once in front of the other staff," Sophia said. 6 months ago, I didn't respond to it. That's the extent of our interactions." You paused before answering that. "I was deciding how much detail to include." Alexander looked at her steadily. "Include all of it." "That's all there is," Sophia said. "What I paused over was whether to mention something else. Something I heard tonight and after you left me here." The room went very still. She told him. The voices in the corridor, Ivy's voice and a man's voice she didn't recognize. "You said she wouldn't find anything. She wasn't supposed to be in that section. She has no proof. He'll be grateful for a day and then move on. If he doesn't, we adjust." She told him all of it, word for word, the way her brain had recorded it the moment she understood what she was hearing. When she finished, Alexander was looking at the floor. His jaw was tight. His hands were in his pockets, and she could see by the set of his knuckles that they were fists. The man's voice, he said. Describe it. Younger than middle-aged, local accent but trying to smooth it out. Angry but trying to sound calm. She paused, and he knew about the plan. He didn't ask Ivy what had happened. He asked her why it hadn't gone the way it was supposed to. The silence that followed was different from the earlier ones. Denser, more dangerous. You notice a great deal, Alexander said quietly. His voice had changed. Some surface quality had worn away, leaving something rawer and harder underneath. I've been invisible for 11 years, Sophia said. Invisible people hear everything. He looked at her, then really looked at her, maybe for the first time, and for one strange, exposed moment, Sophia felt something shift in the room, some fundamental arrangement of power that she didn't fully understand. Then he moved toward the door and stopped with his hand on the frame. You'll stay in the house tonight. 3rd floor east. I'll have a room made available. Am I a prisoner? Sophia asked. No. He didn't look back. You're a precaution. Against what? He paused. When he answered, his voice was flat and careful in the way of someone saying something true that they would have preferred to leave unsaid. Against whoever put Lily in that bin, deciding that you saw too much to be left walking around. He left. The room was small and clean. Sophia lay on the narrow bed with her uniform still on, shoes still on, staring at the ceiling in the dark, and let herself shake for exactly 60 seconds. She counted them, then she stopped. She thought about the dry shoes. She thought about the rehearsed accusation. She thought about the voice in the corridor saying, "We adjust." She thought about a 4-year-old girl in a white nightgown with embroidered flowers buried in a garbage bin on a night cold enough to kill. Someone inside this house had done that. Not a stranger, not an outsider. Someone who knew the schedules, the routine, the layout of the yard. Someone who had a key. And somewhere below her in some expensive room, Alexander Romano was either going to figure out who that was or decide that the safest course of action was to make sure Sophia Martinez went back to being invisible. Permanently. She pressed her hands flat against the mattress. She breathed in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. She had spent 11 years disappearing. It had never once kept her safe. Maybe it was time, she thought, to try something different. Sophia didn't sleep again after that. She lay on that narrow bed and listened to the house settle around her, the creak of old wood, the distant murmur of voices she couldn't quite make out, the rain finally easing off somewhere around 4 in the morning, and she put together what she knew the same way she used to do the kitchen inventory. Methodically, without panic. One item at a time. Lily Romano had been drugged and hidden in a garbage bin. Ivy Russo had been outside, waiting accusation already prepared. A man whose voice Sophia didn't recognize had been involved. And Alexander Romano, who was not a man anyone in their right mind wanted as an enemy, was currently somewhere in this house, trying to decide whether Sophia was a hero or a liability. She was still working through the implications of that last part when the door opened at 6:15 and a young maid she vaguely recognized, Teresa, Teresa slipped in with a change of clothes and a tray with coffee and told her without making eye contact that Mr. Romano would see her at 7. Is Lily awake? Sophia asked. The girl hesitated, just for a second. I don't know, ma'am. She left before Sophia could ask anything else. Sophia drank the coffee, standing up. It was good coffee, of course it was. Everything in this house was good. And she used the 7 minutes it took her to drink it to remind herself of something her mother had told her once, when Sophia was 12 years old and terrified about a school hearing that could have gotten her expelled for something she hadn't done. Her mother had held her face in both hands and said very plainly, "The truth doesn't need you to dress it up, mija. It just needs you to say it out loud and refuse to take it back." Sophia set down the cup. She changed her clothes. She went downstairs at 7 o'clock exactly. Alexander was in the study, standing behind a desk that could have served as a dining table for 6 people. He wasn't alone. A man Sophia didn't know sat in the chair across the desk, 50s, silver-haired, wearing a suit that said lawyer, the same way some men's faces say tired. He didn't introduce himself when Sophia came in. He looked at her the way lawyers look at things they're assessing for usefulness. Sit down, Alexander said. She sat. This is Mr. Carver. He handles certain matters for the family. Alexander remained standing. He had the look of a man who had not slept either, though, on him. It manifested differently, not as exhaustion, but as a kind of stripped-down alertness, like something non-essential had been removed overnight. He's going to ask you some questions. Answer them the same way you answered mine last night. All right, Sophia said. Mr. Carver opened a slim folder. Miss Martinez, where were you born? Pilsen, South Side. You've worked for 3 private households before this one. The Brennan family, the Kwan family, and 1 year at a residential hotel on Michigan Avenue. Is that correct? Yes. No criminal record, no outstanding debts beyond a manageable amount on one credit account. One dependent, your mother, Maria Martinez, 61, retired. You send her money every month. He looked up. Consistently for 9 years. Sophia said nothing. She hadn't been asked a question. You live in Bridgeport, Carver continued. You take the bus. You don't own a car. You've never been involved in any legal proceedings, civil or criminal. He closed the folder. You are by every metric exactly what you appear to be. Yes, Sophia said. I am. Carver looked at Alexander. Some silent communication passed between them that Sophia wasn't meant to read. Then Carver stood, picked up his folder, and without another word to Sophia, walked out of the room. Alexander watched the door close. Then he pulled out the chair behind the desk and sat down. And for the first time, Sophia saw something in his posture that wasn't control, a weight sitting just below the surface of him, enormous and carefully managed. Ivy is gone, he said. Sophia went still. Gone as in not in this house anymore. He said it flatly. As in, I spoke with her at 5 this morning, and she is no longer employed here and is no longer on the property. He paused. I want you to know that. Did she say anything? She said a great many things. His jaw tightened. Most of them were about how much she had sacrificed for this family, how she had given 3 years of her life, how she didn't deserve to be treated this way. He looked at Sophia with an expression she couldn't fully name, something dry and exhausted and furious all at once. She didn't say a single word about my daughter being in a garbage bin. The silence that followed that was sharp enough to cut. She's not the only one involved, Sophia said carefully. I know. The man in the corridor. I know. He said it again, and this time the weight of it was different. Heavier. Like a man who already knows the answer to a question he doesn't want to have asked. I have people working on that. Sophia looked at him. Are you going to tell me who you think it is? He looked back at her for a long moment. No. Because you don't trust me, or because knowing would put me in a worse position than I'm already in? Something moved across his face. Almost surprise. Almost. The second one, he said. She nodded slowly. That at least was honest. She could work with honest. Can I see Lily? She asked. He didn't answer immediately. He looked at her with those dark measuring eyes, and she could feel him doing the calculation, what she wanted, what level of access was appropriate, what the risk was. She waited him out. She asked for you, he said finally, and something in his voice shifted when he said it, something softer or lower that he seemed to catch and pull back almost immediately. She woke up an hour ago. She doesn't remember much, but she remembered the woman who held her in the rain. Sophia's throat tightened. She didn't let it show. Then I'd like to see her. Lily Romano was small for her age, dark-haired, with her father's serious eyes and apparently none of his talent for concealing what she felt. The moment Sophia came through the door of the child's bedroom, Lily's face did something uncomplicated and devastating. It crumpled inward with relief, and she held out both arms and said, You came back. Sophia crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed and let the little girl hold her hand, and she kept her voice very steady. Of course I came back. How are you feeling? Cold, Lily said, and my head hurts. Both of those will get better. Sophia looked at the child, the normal color slowly returning to her face, the blue gone from her lips, the embroidered flowers on a fresh nightgown, this one clean. Are you scared? Lily thought about this seriously. A little, but not when you're here. Sophia heard the door open behind her. She didn't turn around. She didn't need to. She could feel Alexander standing in the doorway watching this exchange with an expression she suspected she wasn't supposed to see. Daddy, Lily said past Sophia's shoulder, this is the lady who found me. I know, baby, Alexander said. His voice directed at his daughter was entirely different from every version of it Sophia had heard so far. Softer, careful in the way of someone carrying something breakable. I know who she is. Her name is Sophia. Lily looked up at her with complete certainty. Right, right, Sophia said. Are you going to stay? Lily asked. Sophia opened her mouth, closed it, looked at the little girl's face, which was watching her with an openness that was almost unbearable in its trust. That's not really up to me, she said gently. It could be up to Teddy. Lily turned to look at Alexander with the complete tactical confidence of a 4-year-old who knows exactly where her leverage is. Honey, can Sophia stay in the doorway? Alexander Romano, who ran an organization that made federal agents lose sleep, said nothing for a moment. And then he said very quietly, "We'll see," which Sophia thought was the most human thing she had heard him say since she met him. She was back in the East Parlor at 9:30 when Marco found her. She didn't know his name yet. When he appeared in the doorway, she'd find it out later. At that moment, he was simply a man she hadn't seen before, late 30s, compact with the kind of face that was easy to underestimate, and had probably been used as a professional advantage more than once. He was wearing plain clothes, not the staff uniform, and he looked at her with an expression of frank assessment that was somehow less threatening than Carver's had been. More direct, less like being evaluated and more like being read. "You're the maid who found Lily," he said. "Sophia Martinez," she said, "and you are Marco Vitale." He came into the room and sat down across from her without being invited, which told her immediately that he operated differently from most people in this house. "I work for Mr. Romano, not the official capacity. The other one." "The other one," Sophia repeated. "The kind that involves figuring out when people inside this organization are working against it." He folded his hands. He had the calm of someone who had been in a great many rooms with a great many frightened people and had learned to wait. "I've been up since 3 this morning, going through security footage and phone records. I want to ask you a few things, and I want you to understand that the things you tell me may affect people's lives significantly. So I'm asking you to be precise." "I'm always precise," Sophia said. He almost smiled. "Good. The man whose voice you heard in the corridor last night, you said younger than middle-aged, local accent, smoothed over, angry, controlling it. What else?" Sophia thought. "He was used to being listened to. When Ivy pushed back, he didn't escalate, he went colder. That's not how someone reacts when they're afraid of the person they're talking to. That's how someone reacts when they consider themselves in charge." Marco's eyes sharpened. He leaned forward slightly. "He was here in the house. He was on the 3rd floor at approximately 2:15 in the morning. Staff corridor East Wing." Sophia paused. "How many people have legitimate access to that corridor at that hour?" Marco was quiet for 3 seconds. "Fewer than 10, he said. "Then you have a short list." "We have a list," he agreed. "The question is which name on it." He looked at her steadily. "The name Vincent Russo mean anything to you?" The name was new, but the structure of it wasn't. "Russo," Sophia said. "Ivy's brother." Marco said it simply. 34 years old. Has been trying to insert himself into the Romano organization's secondary holdings for 2 years. Mr. Romano has declined. Twice. He let that sit for a moment. "Lily is Mr. Romano's only heir. If something happened to her, the inheritance structure becomes significantly more complicated, and the secondary holdings, the ones Vincent wants access to, would likely go into disputed status." Sophia felt the cold weight in her chest shift and rearrange itself into something with a clearer shape. "He wasn't trying to kill her," she said slowly. "If she was found in time, she's traumatized, and her father is distracted, and the family is in crisis. If she wasn't found in time," she stopped. "Either outcome worked for him," Marco said. "More or less." The room was very quiet. "He didn't know I'd be the one taking out the trash, and Sophia said. "It was supposed to be Danny, the kitchen porter. He called in sick last night." Marco looked at her. "How do you know that?" "Because Danny takes out the trash every Thursday night, and I covered for him. The supervisor asked me at 9:30. She paused. "Which means whoever planned this, Vincent Ivy, whoever they expected the bin not to be opened until morning collection. They expected no one to find her until it was too late." Something crossed Marco's face, a tightening around the eyes, quick and controlled, but genuine. That's exactly what they expected, he said. The implication hung in the air between them like smoke. Danny, Sophia said quietly, is he? He's fine. He genuinely has food poisoning. Verified. Marco stood. He looked at her differently than he had when he came in, still assessing, but with something added to it. Something that looked, Sophia thought, almost like respect. You see a lot for someone in your position. In my position, Sophia said carefully, seeing things is how you survive. Marco nodded once. He moved toward the door. Then he stopped. Mr. Romano is going to offer you something this afternoon, he said, not turning around. Think carefully before you decide what to ask for. And don't ask for too little. He paused. You pulled his daughter out of a garbage bin. In this world, that is not a small thing. Then he was gone. Sophia sat with that for a long time. She thought about her mother's apartment in Bridgeport, with the leak under the sink that the landlord had been promising to fix for 8 months. She thought about the medication that cost $240 a month. She thought about the bus at 12:15 and the frozen platform in January, and the uniform with the small coffee stain on the left cuff that she'd never quite been able to get out. She thought about 11 years of disappearing. She thought about Lily saying you came back with her arms already out. She was still thinking when Alexander came in at 2 in the afternoon and sat across from her with his elbows on his knees and his hands loosely folded and looked at her with an expression that was the most unguarded thing she had seen on his face so far. Vincent Russo accessed the property last night through the North Service gate, he said. The guard on that gate has been on Vincent's payroll for at least 4 months. We have the bank records. He said it as if he were reciting a weather report, but under it, the fury was a living thing barely contained, pacing behind his eyes. Ivy led him into the house. He administered the sedative and placed Lily in the bin. Ivy was outside to ensure she wasn't found and to deflect suspicion if anything went wrong. Sophia said nothing. She waited. They calculated that if Lily died, I'd be compromised long enough for Vincent to make a move on the secondary holdings through a legal challenge. If she survived but was severely affected, the same principle applied. I'd be focused on my daughter, not on my business. He paused. What they didn't calculate was an anonymous maid taking out the trash 45 minutes early. Danny's food poisoning, Sophia said. Yes, he looked at her. A very inconvenient case of food poisoning for 2 people who spent weeks planning this. The absurdity of it hung in the room for a moment. Not funny, but close. What happens to Vincent? Sophia asked. That's being handled. And Ivy. Also being handled. His voice was flat and final, and Sophia decided not to ask for clarification on what handled meant in the context of Alexander Romano's vocabulary. She straightened in her chair. Marco said you were going to offer me something. Something shifted in his expression, not surprise exactly. More like recognition. Marco talks too much, he said, but without heat. What are you offering? Sophia asked. He looked at her steadily. What do you want? She had thought about this. She had spent the last 4 hours thinking about it, turning it over, testing different answers against the reality of who he was and who she was and what this moment actually was. And the answer that kept coming back wasn't the pragmatic one or the safe one or even the modest one. I want to stay, she said, not as the kitchen maid, as Lily's personal staff. Someone who's in her orbit, who knows her schedule, who's actually present when something goes wrong. She held his gaze. Because whoever helped Vincent last night is probably not the last person who'll see your daughter as a way to get to you. And the people you surround yourself with are very good at being invisible in their own way. They don't see the maid. She paused. I'd rather be in the room than find her in a dumpster a second time. The silence went on long enough that Sophia felt the first edge of doubt. Then Alexander said, you understand what it means to be in that room. I understand it's dangerous, she said. I've been invisible, and it didn't keep me safe either. At least this way I see it coming. He was quiet for another moment. Then he nodded once slow, like something being decided at a level deeper than thought. You'll answer to me directly, he said, not to the household manager, not to anyone else. If something happens with Lily, anything, you come to me first. Agreed, Sophia said. And Martinez. He held her gaze. What I told you this morning about Vincent and Ivy that doesn't leave this room. What Marco told you, same. What you see in this house from this point forward, same. I've been keeping this family's secrets for 2.5 years, Sophia said. I just didn't know how many there were. He stood. He extended his hand. Sofia Martinez stood up and shook the hand of Alexander Romano, and something in the room rearranged itself, something fundamental and permanent, the way a room changes when a piece of furniture that was always in the wrong place is finally moved. She had come in last night as nobody, as the invisible woman, as the maid whose name nobody could quite remember. She was leaving this room as something else entirely. She just didn't know yet how much that was going to cost her. 3 days passed before Sophia understood the full shape of what she had walked into. The first day was quiet in the way that certain silences are quiet, not peaceful but loaded, the way a room feels after an argument that hasn't happened yet. She moved Lily's schedule into her head like a second heartbeat. Morning medication at 7, breakfast at 7:30. The physical therapist came Tuesdays and Fridays. The pediatrician had been called in once already since the incident and would come again Thursday. Lily slept with a nightlight and woke up twice most nights, and the second time was always harder than the first. Sophia learned all of this in 48 hours by doing what she had always done best, watching, listening, saying less than she knew. The other staff watched her back. She felt it constantly. At meals in the kitchen, in the corridors, when she passed the security desk near the main foyer. Eyes that slid away too quickly. Conversations that paused a beat too long when she entered a room. She was new to this floor of the house, and she had arrived under circumstances that everyone knew about and no one would discuss directly, and that made her something they hadn't figured out how to categorize yet. Not quite staff, not quite anything else. The woman Alexander Romano had specifically elevated, which in this world meant she was either very protected or very exposed, and nobody could tell which, yet including possibly her. On the third morning, a woman named Carla cornered her in the upstairs linen closet. Carla was the senior housekeeper, mid-50s, 20 years, with the Romano family, the kind of woman whose authority over a household ran so deep it was practically geological. She was not unkind exactly, but she was not warm either, and the way she positioned herself in the closet doorway made it impossible for Sophia to leave without making it obvious she was trying to. "I want to be straight with you," Carla said. Not unkindly, but not gently either. What happened with Ivy that was a shock to everyone here. She'd been with Lily since the beginning. People trusted her. "I understand," Sophia said. "What I'm saying is that people are still processing it." Carla looked at her steadily. "And some of them are going to look at you and see the woman who replaced someone they trusted. That's not fair to you, but it's true." "I appreciate you telling me," Sophia said. "I'm not telling you to be kind." Carla's voice was matter-of-fact. "I'm telling you because you should know what you're walking into before you walk into it further." She paused. "There's a man on the security team. His name is Garrett. He was close to the guard who was working the north gate the night Lily was put in that bin. The guard who was on Vincent's payroll." She held Sophia's gaze. "Garrett's been asking questions about you. What your hours are, which floor you sleep on, whether you're alone in the evenings." The air in the small closet felt suddenly thinner. "How long has he been asking?" Sophia said to him. 2 days. Carla studied her. "I'm telling you because Lily likes you, and I've spent 20 years keeping this child's mother's memory honored in this house, and I'll be damned if I watch another person fail her on my watch." She straightened. "Watch your back, Miss Martinez. Not everyone in this house is unhappy that Ivy is gone." She walked out. Sophia stood in the linen closet for a full 30 seconds before she trusted her legs to move normally. She went straight to Marco. He wasn't hard to find. She was learning that Marco operated in the spaces between the official structure of the household present without being announced, available without being summoned. She found him in the small office off the security corridor, and she told him about Garrett in the same precise, unembellished way she'd told him everything else. And she watched his face go through something careful and controlled that told her without him saying a word that the name was not a surprise. "You already knew," she said. "We were watching him," Marco said. "We didn't want to move too fast and spook him before we knew who he was feeding information to. And now he's asked 3 people what floor you sleep on," Marco said, which answers the question of what he's planning to do with the information. He looked at her. "You'll move rooms tonight. New room, different floor, different wing." I'll arrange it. That's reactive, Sophia said. He'll know I was told, which means he'll know someone in the house is watching him, which means he'll go quiet and you'll lose the thread. Marco looked at her for a moment. You're right, he said, which surprised her slightly. What do you suggest? Leave the room assignment exactly as it is, Sophia said, but don't put me in it. She paused. I can sleep on the cot in Lily's sitting room. I've been doing it the last 2 nights anyway. She's been waking up scared. Nobody questions it. And in the meantime, Garrett thinks I'm exactly where he expects me to be. Marco was quiet for a moment. Then he said, how did you know about the cot in the sitting room? Lily's previous nanny, not Ivy, the one before her, used it during Lily's ear infection last winter. Carla mentioned it offhand. She paused. I retain things. Apparently. He looked at her with that same expression of recalibration she was beginning to recognize, the expression of a man who had placed her in one category and found she kept exceeding its boundaries. All right, we'll do it your way. But you tell me the moment anything feels wrong. Not after. The moment. Agreed, Sophia said. She turned to go. Martinez? She stopped. Carla's been here 20 years. She doesn't talk to new people. He let that sit for a second. You made an impression. Sophia thought about that on her way back upstairs. It felt in a very cautious way like something she wasn't quite ready to call progress, but couldn't call nothing either. On the 4th day, Lily asked about her mother. They were sitting together on the floor of the sitting room, Lily insisting with the complete physical certainty of small children on doing a puzzle that had 48 pieces and seemed to be specifically designed to torture adults, when she looked up and said completely without preamble, My mama's in heaven. Did you know that? Sophia kept her hands on the puzzle pieces. I did know that, yes. Daddy doesn't talk about her much. Lily fitted 2 pieces together with serious concentration. But he has a picture of her on his desk, the one with the blue frame. She looked up. Do you have a mama? I do, Sophia said. She lives in Bridgeport. I call her every day. Is she nice? She's the best person I know. Lily considered this. My mama was nice. Rosa, she used to work here before Ivy. Rosa told me my mama was the nicest person in the whole house. She paused. I think Ivy wasn't very nice. I didn't know that before. Her small face did something complicated, working through a feeling that was too big and too new for her vocabulary. Is it okay that I didn't know? Sophia put down the puzzle piece she was holding. Yes, she said carefully. It is absolutely okay. Some people are very good at pretending to be nice. How do you know the difference? Lily asked. It was such a direct question, so genuinely curious, that it landed somewhere in Sophia's chest and sat there. Usually, Sophia said, the difference is what they do when they think nobody's watching. Lily thought about this with the deep seriousness she brought to most things. Then she nodded, apparently satisfied, and went back to the puzzle. You're nice even when you think nobody's watching, she said. I watched you yesterday when you thought I was asleep. You folded my blanket really carefully. Sophia felt something she didn't entirely know what to do with move through her. She pressed her lips together and picked the puzzle piece back up and said lightly, You're sneaky for a 4-year-old. Lily grinned. It was the first time Sophia had seen her grin, and it was enormous, that grin too big for her face and completely unguarded in the way that only children who have not yet learned to protect themselves can be unguarded. And for one sharp, clear moment, so if we thought about the bin and the cold and the blue lips and felt something violent and protective move through her that had nothing to do with her job description. The door opened and Alexander came in, and the look on his face when he saw Lily grinning on the floor was the same enormous, carefully managed thing Sophia had seen in the yard, in the study, in every room she'd watched him in something real, pushing against a surface that had been trained for years not to let it through. Puzzle, he said. Daddy, Sophia says I'm sneaky. Sophia's extremely perceptive, he said, and it was almost dry, almost a joke, which was the closest thing to lightness Sophia had heard from him, and she filed it away without comment. He sat on the floor beside his daughter. He did not look at Sophia directly, but the question when it came was clearly for her. Anything I should know about today? I spoke with Marco this morning, she said. He can update you on the details, but everything with Lily is fine. He nodded. He picked up a puzzle piece. He held it out to Lily without looking at it, and Lily took it and clicked it immediately into the right place, which suggested this was a practice routine between them. Sophia watched the two of them for a moment, the large, careful, contained man and the small, entirely uncontained girl, and thought about what Marco had said. In this world that is not a small thing, she was beginning to understand exactly how large a thing it was. The call from her mother came at 8 that evening, and the moment Sophia heard Maria's voice, something tight in her chest released. "You didn't call yesterday," her mother said. Not accusatory, just noting the fact the way you note a change in weather. "I know, Mama. I'm sorry. It's been a complicated week." Complicated how Maria Martinez had the particular radar of a woman who had raised a child alone, had not enough money, and had developed through necessity an extremely accurate instrument for detecting when that child was not telling her something. "Work things, Sophia said. "I will explain when I see you." "Are you safe?" The question landed precisely on the bruise. "Yes," Sophia said, "I am safe." "You don't sound safe. You sound like you're trying to sound safe, which is different." Sophia pressed her back against the wall of the sitting room and closed her eyes. "I found a little girl in trouble," she said carefully, "and I helped her. And now I'm in a different position at work than I was before. A better one, I think. It's just new." The silence on the other end of the line had texture. Her mother was thinking. "This little girl," Maria said, "she's okay now. She's okay now. And you?" Sophia thought about Garrett asking what floor she slept on. She thought about Ivy's dry shoes in the rain. She thought about Marco saying move rooms and herself saying no, leave it, and the particular cold clarity of realizing she had started operating in the logic of this world so naturally it hadn't even felt like a decision. "I'm okay," she said. "I promise." "Mija." Her mother's voice was quiet, steady. "Whatever you walked into, you didn't walk into it by accident. You walked into it because that's who you are. And that's not a bad thing." A pause. "Just don't forget who you are when you're inside it." Sophia opened her eyes. "I won't," she said. "I love you, Mama. I love you more. Call me tomorrow." She hung up and sat in the quiet for a moment. Then she heard it. Footsteps in the corridor outside. Slow, deliberate. Pausing outside the door that led to her listed room 2 doors down. Her heart rate climbed, but her body stayed completely still. She had specifically not been in that room tonight. She was in Lily's sitting room, separated from the corridor by a secondary door that locked from the inside. Lily was asleep in the bedroom beyond, behind another door. She was not in danger. She told herself this clearly and precisely while she picked up her phone and typed a message to Marco. "Someone in the corridor. Outside 3E. Standing, not moving." The response came in 11 seconds. "Don't open the door. Stay with Lily. We have it." She set the phone down on the floor screen, facing down so the light wouldn't show under the door. She sat in the dark and breathed in 4s and listened. The footsteps moved away 3 minutes later, slow in the other direction. Her hands, she noticed, were perfectly steady. She wasn't sure when that had started happening. Marco came to find her at 6:30 the next morning, and she knew from the look on his face before he opened his mouth that something had broken loose overnight. Garrett made a call at 1 in the morning, he said, sitting down across from her in the kitchen early enough that the other staff weren't in yet. "Burner phone, but we had the frequency. The number he called has been identified." He looked at her directly. "It belongs to a line connected to Vincent Russo." Sophia set down her coffee cup. "Vincent is still operating." "Vincent is in the wind," Marco said. "He wasn't at his apartment when we went. Hadn't been for 2 days. His voice was even, but there was something controlled and dangerous underneath it. He knows we're looking for him, which means he also knows we identified his involvement, which means he knows we got that from somewhere inside the house." He paused. "Which means he knows about you." The silence that followed was a different kind of silence. "He's going to come back," Sophia said. "We don't know that." "He has to." Sophia heard her own voice come out flat and clear the way her mother's did when she was stating something obvious. "He put months of planning into this. He lost Ivy, he lost his inside man on the gate, and his main play failed because a kitchen maid was taking out trash at the wrong time. He is not going to walk away from that." She looked at Marco. What kind of person plans something this careful and just disappears when it doesn't work? Marco looked at her for a long moment. The kind who's regrouping, he said. Yeah, Sophia said, which means we have time, but not much. Marco leaned back in his chair. He had the expression of a man revising something. Romano wants to see you at 8, he said. I'd mentioned some of this to him last night. He asked specifically that you be present for a conversation this morning. A beat. Not as staff. Then what? Sophia said. As someone whose perspective he wants in the room. Marco looked almost uncomfortable saying it as though it still surprised him slightly. He doesn't do that easily. Bring people into the conversation. I know, Sophia said. I'm not sure you fully know what it means in this context. It means, Sophia said carefully, that he's decided I'm useful, and that as long as I'm useful, he'll protect me. And I need to be clear-eyed about the fact that those two things are connected. Marco studied her. Most people in your position would be flattered right now. I'm not ungrateful, Sophia said. I'm just not naive. She picked up her coffee cup again. There's a difference. Something in Marco's face shifted, not quite a smile, but the precursor to one. You should have been in this world a long time ago, he said. No, Sophia said simply. I really shouldn't have. So, the meeting at 8 was in Alexander's study, and there were 3 other men in the room when Sophia arrived. Marco Carver, the lawyer, and a third man she didn't know, heavy-set with the kind of quiet that belonged to someone who was paid specifically to observe. Alexander stood by the window. He looked at Sophia when she came in and said without preamble, "Close the door." She closed it. Vincent made contact last night, he said. Not with Garrett, with someone else. Someone we hadn't identified yet. His jaw was tight. He's not running, he's reorganizing. He looked around the room. The goal is the same. What's changed is the timeline. He's moving faster. What's the ask? Carver said. He reached out to a member of the secondary board. Anonymous message through a proxy. The implication was that he has or claims to have documentation of irregularities in the Romano holdings from 3 years ago. Material that could be used to challenge Lily's inheritance position legally. Alexander's voice was flat clinical, but the effort it took to keep it that way was visible if you knew where to look. It's leverage. He's shifting from a direct play against Lily to a legal one. Carver exhaled through his nose. If the documentation exists, it doesn't matter if it exists, Alexander said. What matters is that he can make it exist. He looked at Sophia. You said yesterday that he wouldn't walk away. You were right. Sophia felt the weight of the room on her. 4 people, all of them more experienced in this world than she was, all of them looking at her with different degrees of expectation. She thought about her mother saying, "Don't forget who you are when you're inside it." He's frightened, Sophia said. That's what this is. The original plan was elegant, quiet, no direct fingerprints. This is messier, faster, more aggressive, more exposed. That's not confidence. That's someone who feels the ground moving under him. She paused. Which means he's making mistakes. The room was quiet. What kind of mistakes? Alexander said. He contacted the secondary board through a proxy, Sophia said, which means the proxy knows who he is, or at least how to reach him. And the proxy is a person who accepted a message from a man currently wanted by you. She looked at Alexander. That person is frightened of Vincent, but they're more frightened of you, and they don't know yet how much you already know. Alexander looked at her for a long moment. Something moved through his expression, several things actually in quick succession, and she watched them move the way you watch weather change over a flat landscape. Calculation. Something sharper. Something that was almost in a controlled way relief. You're saying we go through the proxy, Marco said. I'm saying the proxy will come to you if you give them a reason to feel that coming to you is safer than staying silent, Sophia said. And right now they don't know you know they exist, which means the window is open and it won't stay open long. Carver looked at Alexander. Alexander looked at Sophia. How do you know this? He said, not skeptical, genuinely asking. Because I spent 11 years watching what people do when they're caught between 2 powerful forces, Sophia said. They don't stay loyal to the one who scares them more. They run toward the one who gives them an exit. She paused. You're the exit. Alexander turned back to the window. The silence lasted long enough that Sophia began to doubt herself, to feel the ground shift slightly beneath her own certainty. Then he said to Marco, find the proxy. Don't move on them. Just find them and sit on it until I say. Done, Marco said, in Martinez. Alexander was still facing the window. You're in this room from now on and when we discuss Lily's security, not as a formality, as a working member. He paused. You understand what that means. She understood exactly what it meant. She had said it to Marco 40 minutes ago clearly and without sentiment. He's decided I'm useful, and as long as I'm useful, he'll protect me, and those two things are connected. She understood all of it, and she also understood with a clarity that was separate from strategy and separate from calculation, and came from somewhere much older and more stubborn in her, that she was not going to let a 4-year-old girl be used as a chess piece by a man who could not find the courage to come at her father directly. Not because it was her job, not because Alexander Romano had extended her his protection, because she had pulled that child out of the cold with her bare hands and she was not done yet. I understand, Sofia Martinez said, and she meant every word of it. The proxy had a name by noon. Marco found her in 40 minutes flat, which told Sofia something about how good Marco was at his job and something else about how careless Vincent had become when he was frightened. The proxy was a woman named Delia Marsh, 41 accounts manager for one of the Romano secondary holdings, 12 years, with the organization no prior incidents on her record. She had received Vincent's message on a Tuesday morning, sat on it for 36 hours and had not yet responded, which meant, as Sofia had said, the window was still open. Alexander made the decision by 12:15. He would not send Marco. He would not send Carver. He looked at Sofia across the study and said, I want you to go. The room went quiet in a specific way. Me, Sofia said. You're not a face she associates with pressure, Alexander said. She knows what Marco is. She knows what Carver is. She doesn't know you. He held her gaze. You said she'll come toward whoever gives her an exit. You give her a better exit than I do. Because I'm not you, Sofia said. Because you're not me, he confirmed. Marco said nothing, but she could feel him watching her calibrating. If she panics and contacts Vincent, Sofia said, he knows we found her. She won't panic, Alexander said. Simply, like a statement of fact. How do you know? Because you'll read her right, and you'll know within the first 2 minutes whether she's going to talk. He paused. The same way you read everything else in this house. He said it without flattery, just accuracy, and somehow that made it harder to argue with than a compliment would have. Sofia looked at him for a long moment. What do I tell her? The truth, Alexander said. That Vincent is moving and she's standing directly in his path. That if she waits for him to use her and discard her, that's exactly what will happen. And that if she comes to me now voluntarily, she walks away clean. A pause. Those are the terms. They're real. I keep my terms. She'll want to know why she should believe that. Then tell her to ask anyone who's ever taken a deal from me. His voice was flat and final. There are several. They're all still walking around. Sofia stood up. When 2 hours, Marco said. I'll have an address. She was at the door when Alexander said quietly, Martinez. She stopped. Be careful with her. She's not Garrett. She's not a player. She's someone who got a message she didn't ask for and has been terrified ever since. He paused, and there was something in the pause that was careful in a different way. People like that can break in the wrong direction if they're pushed too hard. Sofia turned to look at him. I know, she said. I was that person once. She left before she could see his expression change. Delia Marsh worked late on Tuesdays at a satellite office on the north side, and Marco had confirmed she was alone in the building by 1:40. Sofia arrived at 2, took the elevator to the 4th floor, and knocked on the glass door of the account suite with the particular unhurried confidence of someone who has every right to be exactly where they are. Delia opened the door, and the fear on her face was so immediate and unguarded that Sofia felt a sharp pang of recognition go through her. She looked like someone who hadn't slept in 2 days. I'm not here to threaten you, Sofia said before Delia could speak. I'm not carrying anything, and I came alone. My name is Sofia Martinez. I work directly for Alexander Romano, and I came to have a conversation, not a confrontation. Can I come in? Delia looked at her for a long, trembling second. Then she stepped back. They sat across from each other at a conference table, and Sofia let the silence breathe for a moment, not as pressure, but as space, the way her mother had always said, you sometimes needed to give frightened people room before they talk. Delia's hands were clasped on the table, and she was working very hard to look like someone who wasn't frightened, which Sophia understood completely. "You know why I'm here," Sophia said. "I haven't responded to it," Delia said immediately. "To the message, I haven't done anything." "I know," Sophia said. "That's why I'm sitting in a chair across from you instead of someone else." Delia exhaled. It came out slightly unsteady. "What does he want me to do?" "Nothing that hurts you," Sophia said. "I need to know the exact content of the message, how it was delivered, and whether there's been any follow-up contact. If I tell you that, if you tell me that," Sophia said, "you are no longer someone who sat on information about a threat to the Romano family. You're someone who came forward voluntarily within the acceptable window." She held the woman's gaze. "That window closes when Vincent moves again. Nobody knows exactly when that is, but I'd guess it's soon." Delia's throat moved. "He said the message said that he had documentation, financial records from 3 years ago. He said if Romano's people ever looked too close, the records would come out and Lily Romano's inheritance would be challenged in court." She paused. "He said he needed someone inside the secondary holdings to corroborate one document. Just sign off on the dates." He made it sound like it was nothing. "It's not nothing," Sophia said. "I know it's not nothing." Delia's voice cracked slightly. "I have a daughter. She's 9. I'm not that kind of person. I just—" She stopped, pressed her hands flat against the table. "He knew things about me, personal things, things I've never talked about at work. That's what scared me most. Not the threat. The fact that he'd been watching me long enough to know." Sophia looked at her, not with sympathy that was performance, with the real thing, which was simpler and quieter and probably more useful. "He picked you because he needed someone careful and clean," she said. "Someone without a record who wouldn't raise flags. He wasn't threatening you, Delia. He was recruiting you. There's a difference, Ramon." She paused. "And you can still say no." Delia looked at her with something raw and exhausted in her eyes. "Can I, though?" "You just did," Sophia said, "by talking to me." The silence lasted about 10 seconds. Then Delia reached into her desk drawer, pulled out her phone and placed it on the table between them. The message came through a third-party app. "It's still there. I didn't delete it because I didn't know if that would make it worse." She pushed the phone towards Sophia. "Take it." Sophia took it. She looked at the message, read it twice precisely the way she read everything, and then she placed the phone carefully in her pocket. "I'll need you to write a brief account of when you received this and what you understood it to be asking," she said. 2 paragraphs. Factual. I'll wait." Delia wrote it in 7 minutes. Her handwriting was tight and controlled the handwriting of a woman holding herself together by main force. She slid the paper across the table and said, "What happens now?" "Now you go home," Sophia said. "You act normally. You do not contact Vincent by any means. If he contacts you again, you text this number immediately." She wrote Marco's number on the corner of a blank page. "Don't save it under his name. Save it under a woman's name, a friend's name. And the document, the one he wanted me to sign." "Never existed," Sophia said. She stood up. "Delia," the woman looked up at her. "You made the right call. I know it doesn't feel like that yet. It will." Delia nodded once tight, controlled the nod of someone who was not going to cry until after Sophia left the room. Sophia recognized that too. She was in the elevator when her phone buzzed. "Marco, how'd it go?" She typed back. "We have the message. She's cooperative. No follow-up contact yet from V. Heading back now," his response. "Romano's going to want to debrief immediately. Fair warning, there's something else. Wait until you're in the car." Sophia stared at that last sentence for the rest of the elevator ride. The driver Marco had sent was a quiet man named Felix, who had the specific discipline of someone paid never to hear anything. Sophia got in the car and Marco called before Felix had pulled out of the parking structure. "The financial documentation Vincent mentioned," Marco said. "We've been digging since this morning. We found it." Sophia went still. "It exists. It exists." Marco's voice was careful in a new way, careful the way you're careful when the thing you're reporting is larger than you expected. 3 years ago, there was a series of transfers made from the secondary holdings into a personal account. The transfers were documented as legitimate business expenses. They weren't. A pause. The account they went into belonged to Alexander Romano's late wife. The car was moving and the city was going past the windows, and Sophia sat with that information and felt it arrange itself into a shape she really did not want to look at directly. Elena, she said. She knew the name from Lily, from Carla's careful, reverent references, from the blue-framed photograph on the desk. Elena Romano, Marco confirmed. She died 14 months after the transfers were made. Car accident. It was investigated and ruled accidental. His voice was very flat now, the flatness of someone who is being precise on purpose. Vincent is claiming the transfers represent evidence of fraud, misappropriation of family funds. His position would be that Romano himself orchestrated it, which, if it held, could legally complicate Lily's inheritance status. But the account was Elena's, Sophia said. Yes. Does Alexander know about the transfers? Silence, just a moment of it. That's what he wants to talk to you about, Marco said. The car kept moving. Sophia looked at her own hands in her lap and thought about a blue-frame photograph and a man who said his dead wife's name in a tone of voice he reserved for nothing else. And she thought about the particular cruelty of someone using a dead woman as a weapon against her own child. Marco, she said, yeah. Was it fraud? Another silence. Longer. We don't know yet, he said. That's the honest answer. We don't know yet. Alexander was alone in the study when Sophia arrived. No Marco, no Carver, no third man with the quiet of someone paid to observe. Just Alexander standing by the window again, and the blue-framed photograph on the desk that Sophia could see clearly from the doorway, now that she knew to look for it. She came in. She placed Delia's phone and the handwritten account on his desk. She sat down. He didn't look at the phone. He looked at her. Marco told you, he said. Yes. What did you think when he told you? It was a strange question for him to ask, direct in a way that felt uncharacteristic. She answered it the same way. I thought about your daughter, she said, about what it means for someone to use her mother's name to come after her father. Something moved through his face, fast and then gone. Elena made those transfers, he said. She made them herself without telling me. I found out 6 weeks before she died. He said it evenly, the evenness of something that had been said internally so many times it had worn smooth. She was sending money to her brother. Her brother who had a problem I won't go into the details of, except to say it was the kind of problem that needed cash quietly and that Elena would rather have managed it herself than ask me to. Sophia said nothing. She waited. After she died, I had the transfers reclassified, he said, quietly. Legally, everything was done legally, but it was reclassified in a way that made it less visible, because I didn't want questions about Elena, about her family, about whether she had... He stopped, jaw tight, started again. Because she was gone and the answer to those questions didn't change anything except her memory, and I was not going to let that happen. And now Vincent has the original documentation, Sophia said, before the reclassification. Yes. And he's going to characterize it as fraud. He's going to try... Oh. Alexander turned from the window. He looked directly at her, and the thing behind his eyes now was not the controlled, dangerous fury she had seen before. It was something older, something that had been carried a long time. If this goes to a legal challenge and the original transfers surface without context, without Elena's brother's involvement being documented without the full picture, then yes, it looks like fraud. It looks like I was moving family money into a personal account for purposes that could be used to argue against the legitimacy of the estate. He paused. Lily's inheritance is not at risk from the legal challenge itself. Carver has assured me of that. But the collateral damage from the story, the public record that could be used against her in a dozen other ways over the next 20 years. Sophia looked at him. Elena's brother, she said, where is he now? Alexander's expression shifted. That, he said carefully, is a good question. Is he alive? Yes. He's been in Portugal for 2 years, under different circumstances than the ones that required Elena's assistance. A pause. He doesn't know any of this is happening. He needs to, Sophia said. His testimony about the transfers voluntary documented given before Vincent forces the issue, changes everything. It gives the reclassification a living source. A real explanation with a real person behind it. She held his gaze. Vincent's leverage only works if the full context stays hidden. Bring the context forward yourself on your terms before he can use it. The silence in the room was different from any silence she'd sat in with him before. This one had a quality of exposure to it, as though something that had been interior had been turned outward and was adjusting to the new air. "You're asking me to surface something I spent 3 years burying," he said. "I'm asking you to surface it before someone else does it for you and gets to control the story," Sophia said. "There's a difference," she paused. "Elena protected her brother because she loved him. That's not a scandal. That's the most human thing in the world. Let it be that." He was very still. "You didn't know her," he said. Not unkindly, almost quietly. "No," Sophia said. "But Lily does. Through the blue photograph, through what Carla tells her, through the way you say her name when you think nobody's listening." She stopped herself. She had gone further than she intended. "I'm sorry, that's—" "Don't apologize," he said. And something in the way he said it was not the voice he used for business. It was the other one. The one that came out when Lily grinned at the puzzle. The silence stretched. Then his phone rang. He looked at the screen. Something in his expression sharpened instantly, the vulnerability gone, the control back to surface smooth again with the speed of long practice. He picked it up. "Vitale," he said into it. "Talk." Sophia watched his face as he listened. She watched him go very still in a specific way. The stillness of someone receiving information that is bad, but not surprising. The way you look when the thing you were afraid of has arrived precisely where you thought it would. He hung up. He looked at her. "Vincent made contact with the proxy again," he said. 20 minutes ago. Different channel, not the app. A direct call." His jaw was tight. He gave her a 48-hour deadline to confirm she'll sign the document. He told her that if she doesn't, he'll find a way to make the Romano account's irregularities look like her work. "He's panicking," Sophia said immediately. "He's escalating," Alexander said. "Same thing." Sophia stood up. 48 hours means he needs the document signed before he moves, which means he doesn't have everything he needs yet. "He's still building the case." She looked at Alexander directly. "Call Elena's brother tonight. Not tomorrow, tonight. Get him on a plane." She paused. "And move on Garrett. Now, not later. If Vincent escalates again and Garrett still has access to this house." "Garrett was removed from the property an hour ago," Alexander said. "Marco moved while you were with Delia." "Good," she exhaled. "Then the house is clean and the proxy is protected and we have 48 hours. She looked at him. "That's enough time if we move, right?" He looked at her for a long moment. There was something in his face she had seen building across the last 4 days, a slow, reluctant shift like ice that doesn't want to move but is moving anyway. "You came here 11 days ago as a kitchen maid," he said. "I know what I was," Sophia said. "That's not what I'm saying." He paused. "I'm saying that I have people who have worked for me for 15 years who don't think the way you think." He said it plainly without ornament. "I'm trying to understand how that happens." Sophia thought about 11 years of invisibility, about watching and listening and retaining, about the bus at 12:15 and the coffee stain that wouldn't come out and her mother's hands on her face saying the truth just needs you to say it out loud and refuse to take it back. "When nobody's watching you," she said, "you watch everything else." She picked up her phone. "I'll tell Marco about the call to Delia. You call Portugal." She was almost at the door. "Martinez." She stopped. His voice had the weight of something that had been considered before being said. "When this is over, when Vincent is handled and Lily is stable and the legal situation is resolved." He paused. "I want to talk to you about what comes next, about your position here." She turned slightly. "What about it?" "About making it permanent," he said, "and official, and compensated in a way that matches what you actually are here." Another pause. "Not as charity, as accuracy." Sophia looked at him for a moment. She thought about what Marco had said, "Don't ask for too little." She thought about what she'd told Delia. "You made the right call. It will feel like that eventually." She thought about Lily on the floor with the puzzle and her enormous, unguarded grin, and you came back. Let's get through the next 48 hours first, she said. Agreed, Alexander said, but after. After, Sophia said. She walked out of the study and into the corridor, and she pulled out her phone to call Marco. And she was halfway through dialing when she heard a sound that was wrong in a way she couldn't immediately name. A door somewhere on the upper floor. Not slammed, not dramatic, just opened and then held carefully as though by someone who didn't want the latch to click. She stopped walking. She stood completely still and listened. The house had its own sound she had learned in 11 days. She knew its rhythms the way she'd known the rhythms of every house she'd ever worked in. Which boards creaked, which hinges caught, which doors swung free, and which resisted. She knew the sound of the staff in the early evening. She knew the sound of Lily waking from a nightmare 2 floors up. This sound was none of those things. This sound was someone who knew the house well enough to move through it quietly and was doing exactly that on the 2nd floor in the direction of Lily's room. Sophia didn't call Marco. She didn't stop to think. She moved. She took the stairs at the far end of the corridor, the service stairs, the ones she'd used twice a day for 2.5 years before all of this, the ones that came out 6 feet from Lily's bedroom door, and she took them fast and silent. And when she came out at the top, there was a figure in the corridor outside Lily's door, and even from behind, even in the low evening light, she recognized the posture. Ivy Russo here, in this house, standing outside Lily's door with one hand against the frame and something in her other hand that Sophia couldn't see clearly and did not have the luxury of time to identify. Sophia did not hesitate, not for a single second. Hey! Her voice came out sharp and flat and entirely controlled, cutting down the corridor like something physical. Step away from that door right now. Ivy turned around, and the expression on her face was not the mask Sophia remembered, not the smooth, prepared professional surface. It was something stripped of all of that, something that looked like desperation with the edges worn off into something worse. You don't understand, Ivy said. Step away from the door, Sophia said again, and she was already moving, closing the distance, keeping her eyes on Ivy's hands. He said he'd go after my family, Ivy said, and her voice cracked on the last word in a way that was real, genuinely, unmistakably real. Vincent, he said, if I didn't... She stopped, looked at what was in her hand as if she'd forgotten it was there. It was a phone. Just a phone. He said if I didn't confirm that Lily was alive and in the house by tonight, he would hurt my mother. Sophia stopped 3 feet away. Lily's door was still closed. No sound from inside. She looked at Ivy, at the raccoon rings under her eyes, the clothes that had been slept in, the shaking in her hands. That was not performance. And she felt the same thing she'd felt sitting across from Delia Marsh at the conference table, that particular recognition of someone who had been recruited into something they hadn't understood until they were already in it. How did you get in? Sophia said very quietly. I still had a key, Ivy said. The back entrance, the code hasn't changed. How long has Vincent been threatening your mother? Ivy closed her eyes. From the beginning, she whispered. It was never I didn't want any of it. Lily, I would never have, he said it was just going to be a scare. The money would fix everything, and then it wasn't just a scare anymore. And I was already in it, and I couldn't. She stopped, opened her eyes. They were wet. I would never have hurt her. You have to know that. Sophia looked at her for a long, clear moment. She thought, I don't know that. I can't know that. And this could still be part of something. She also thought the shaking in those hands is real. Give me the phone, Sophia said. Ivy handed it over without resistance. Sophia looked at the screen. There was a message from an unidentified number sent 40 minutes ago. 4 words. Confirm she's alive tonight. Sophia pocketed the phone. She looked at Ivy. You're going to come downstairs with me, she said. You're going to sit in the east parlor. Yes, that room, yes. I understand the irony. And you're going to tell Alexander Romano and Marco Vitali everything you know about Vincent's plan and his timeline and everyone he's been in contact with. She paused. Every single thing, Ivy. Nothing held back. Ivy stopped. What will he do to me? That depends entirely on how complete your information is, Sophia said. But I'll tell you this much. She looked at her steadily. You walked into this house to protect your mother. Alexander Romano protects his family. If you give him what he needs, that calculation changes significantly in your favor. She paused. But you have to be completely honest. Ivy looked at her for a long moment. Then she nodded a single small broken nod. All right, she said. Sophia reached past her and checked Lily's door. Locked from the inside, the night lock, the one Lily had learned to use herself after the incident, which had been Sophia's suggestion and which Lily had embraced with tremendous seriousness. She pressed her palm flat against the door for 1 second, the way you check that something is still there and still safe. Then she straightened up and she looked at the woman who had accused her in the rain 11 days ago and she said, "Come on." And she walked her downstairs. Ivy talked for 2 hours straight. She sat in the east parlor, that same room, that same chair, the fireplace still unlit, and she talked with the focused, exhausted urgency of someone who had been holding something unbearable for too long and had finally found a surface to set it down on. Alexander stood. Marco sat across from her with a recorder running. Sophia stayed near the door not because anyone told her to, but because it felt right. The same instinct that told her when Lily was about to wake from a nightmare, the same instinct that had pulled her to the service stairs 40 minutes ago. Vincent had approached Ivy 14 months ago, not after Elena's death, before it. That was the first thing that landed in the room like a stone dropped from a height. Before, Alexander said. His voice was very quiet. Before. He came to me at a function, Ivy said. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking at her hands. He said he was Elena's cousin. He said he'd been trying to get access to the family for years and kept being shut out. He was charming. I thought it was just networking. It took 3 months before I understood what he actually wanted. Which was, Marco said, access to Lily's schedule, her routines, her security arrangements. Ivy's jaw tightened. He framed it as concern, said he was worried about Lily's welfare, that Alexander was too cold, too distant, that Lily needed more family around her. She paused. I believed him longer than I should have. When did you stop believing him? Sophia said from the door. Ivy looked at her. It was the first time she'd made direct eye contact with Sophia since they'd come downstairs, and there was something in it that was complicated and unresolved and honest. The night he told me about the plan with the bin, she said. He called it a controlled incident. He had a whole clinical language for it. Controlled incident, temporary incapacitation, leverage event. Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. And I said no. I told him no, and he sent me a photograph of my mother getting into her car outside her apartment in Naperville. The room was very still. He'd been watching her for months, Ivy said, before he even told me the plan. He had photographs going back to November. She pressed her hands flat against her thighs. I want you to understand that is the only reason. I know that's not enough. I know it doesn't fix what happened to Lily, but it is the truth and it is the only reason. Alexander had not moved. His face was doing the thing Sophia had learned to read across 11 days, the enormous, controlled interior thing pressing against the surface that had been trained not to let it through. She watched him and she thought about what he'd said about Elena. She managed it herself rather than asking me. She thought about the particular loneliness of people who are surrounded by power and still handle their worst moments entirely alone. Vincent's timeline, Marco said. What does he intend to do in the next 48 hours? Ivy looked at him. He has a meeting tomorrow night with someone on the secondary board, not Delia, someone else, someone he's been cultivating for longer. He's going to present the documentation then. The original transfer records and a legal brief his attorney prepared. She paused. His attorney knows everything. He's been part of it from the beginning. Marco was already typing. Name. Ferris, Ivy said. Patrick Ferris, office on LaSalle. Marco looked at Alexander. Something passed between them. I'll have him contained before morning, Marco said. There's something else, Ivy said. Her voice had dropped. She seemed to be choosing the next words with extreme care. The documentation he has, the original transfer records, he didn't get them from the company files. She looked at Alexander directly for the first time. He got them from Elena's personal files after she died. He was at the estate for the memorial, and he went into her study and he took them. She stopped. He's had them for 3 years. He's been waiting until the timing was right. The silence that followed was of a different quality than any silence that had come before it. This one had grief in it. Real grief present in the room like a physical thing occupying the space around Alexander Romano with a weight that Sophia felt across the room. He said nothing for a long time. Then he said very quietly, "Get out." Ivy stood immediately. "Not the building," he said. "The room. Marco, take her statement formally. Full documentation. Then get her somewhere safe until this is resolved." He paused. "Her mother, too. Get someone to Naperville tonight." Ivy looked at him. Something moved across her face that wasn't quite gratitude and wasn't quite relief and was bigger than both. She opened her mouth. He looked at her once briefly, and whatever was in his expression closed the conversation before it started. She walked out, Marco followed. Sophia didn't move from the door. Alexander stood with his back to her for a moment. Then he turned around and he looked like a man who had just taken a hit and was deciding whether to stay standing, which was exactly what he was. "He was in her study," Alexander said, "at the memorial. While I was downstairs with 200 people I didn't want to be in the same room with, he was upstairs in her study going through her private files." Sophia said nothing. She understood that this was not a moment that required words. "I should have known about him years ago," he said. "I should have known Elena was dealing with something. She carried things quietly. I knew that about her. I let her." His voice was flat and self-contained, and under it the grief was enormous. "I let her because it was easier. Because asking meant a conversation, and she'd made it clear she'd handle it, and I had 1,000 other things, and I told myself that wasn't avoidance." He stopped. "It was avoidance. You loved her," Sophia said, simply, without inflation. "Yes," he said. "That's not an excuse." "No," she said, "but it's a reason. They're not the same thing." He looked at her. She held his gaze without flinching and without softening it, and after a moment, something in him seemed to settle. Not resolution, not peace, but the particular quality of a person who has been witnessed honestly and found it bearable. "Call Portugal," she said. "Right now, tonight." He reached for his phone. Ta-da. Elena's brother was named Tomas. He answered on the third ring, Lisbon time, just past 4 in the morning, and the sound of Alexander's voice on the line produced a silence on the other end that Sophia, sitting in the chair across the desk, present, because Alexander had said stay, without using those exact words, could feel even from a distance. The conversation lasted 19 minutes. She heard only Alexander's side and the tone of it, which was enough. Measured at first, then quieter. Then once a long pause during which Alexander pressed 2 fingers against the bridge of his nose and said, "I know, Tomas. I know she would have." Another long pause. "I need you on a plane tomorrow morning." "Not as a request. I'll explain everything when you land." He hung up. He set the phone down on the desk. He looked at it for a moment. "He didn't know she'd died protecting him," he said. "She never told him what she'd done. He thought the money was a gift." He paused. "He's been carrying guilt about accepting it for 3 years. He thought she gave too much." Sophia thought about Elena Romano, who had managed everything quietly, who had protected her brother without letting him know the cost, who had died with the full weight of it held inside. She thought about the embroidered flowers on Lily's nightgown. She thought about the blue frame photograph. "She sounds like someone worth knowing," Sophia said. Alexander looked at her. "She was," he said, and then after a moment, "She would have liked you." Sophia didn't know what to do with that, so she did what she always did with things she didn't know what to do with. She filed it carefully and moved forward. "Patrick Ferris," she said. "Marco needs to move before business hours or he walks into that board meeting with everything Vincent handed him and triggers the legal challenge before we can get in front of it." "Marco knows," Alexander said. "He's already—" His phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, looked at Sophia. "It's Marco." He answered it and listened for approximately 15 seconds, and she watched his face go through the recalibration. When he said, "Then where is he now? Then don't move without me," he hung up. "Vincent," Sophia said, not a question. "He surfaced," Alexander said. "He was already standing, already moving. He's at Ferris's office. Right now tonight he moved the meeting up. Marco thinks he got spooked. Suspects were closing in." He looked at her. "He's there in person, which is the first genuinely stupid thing he's done." "He panicked," Sophia said. She was on her feet. "I said he would." "You did," Alexander said. He was at the door. He stopped, looked back at her with an expression that was direct and without any of the usual careful management. "Stay with Lily," he said, "please." The please was not a word she had heard from him before. It landed differently than a command would have. "Go," she said. "I've got her." She went upstairs and she unlocked the sitting room, and she sat on the cot in the dark and she listened to the house breathe, and she did not let herself think about what was happening on LaSalle Street, because thinking about it would not change it, and Lily was the crumb, and the job was the only thing she could control right now. Lily slept through the whole night without waking once, which was the first time that had happened since the incident. Sophia sat with that small fact and let it matter as much as it deserved to. Marco called at 2:47 in the morning. "It's done," he said. "Vincent is in custody. Ferris, too. The documentation has been confiscated." A pause. Vincent did not come quietly. Another pause, deliberate. "Nobody is hurt." Sophia exhaled. "Alexander, he's fine. He's handling the immediate situation. He'll be back by morning." The board member Vincent was meeting with, cooperative the moment he understood what he'd walked into, Marco said. Apparently Vincent was considerably less charming in person at 2 in the morning than he'd been over months of careful cultivation. A beat. "Go to sleep, Martinez." "I wasn't sleeping anyway." "I know." His voice had the almost warmth in it she'd come to recognize. "Go pretend to sleep then." She lay back on the cot. The house was quiet. Lily was breathing steadily in the next room. Somewhere in the city, a man named Vincent Russo, who had drugged a 4-year-old girl and hidden her in a garbage bin on a freezing night, was sitting in a room he had not chosen, finally out of moves. Sophia stared at the ceiling and felt something she hadn't felt in so long, she almost didn't recognize it. Safe. Not permanently, not unconditionally, but tonight in this house with this child sleeping on the other side of that door, safe. She was asleep within 10 minutes. Alexander came back at 6:40 in the morning, and the first thing he did before coffee, before the debrief with Carver, before any of the 100 things that needed to happen, was go upstairs to Lily's room. Sophia heard him in the corridor. She heard him pause outside Lily's door. She heard the door open very quietly, and she heard the particular quality of a silence that is a person standing at the edge of a sleeping child's bed, just looking, just confirming the most basic and irreducible fact here, breathing safe mind, and she understood that this moment was not for her, and she stayed exactly where she was. He came into the sitting room a few minutes later. He looked like someone who had been awake all night doing difficult things, which was exactly what he was. He looked at Sophia on the cot, and she looked at him from the cot, and neither of them said anything for a moment. "She slept through the whole night," Sophia said. Something in his face moved. "First time," he said. "Yes." He sat down in the chair by the window. Not the commanding posture of the study, not the contained fury of the service yard. Just a man sitting down because he was tired, and the chair was there. "It's over," he said. "Ferris is cooperating fully. He gave us everything, Vincent's entire network, everyone involved. The documentation is in our hands. Tomas lands at O'Hare at noon." He paused. "The legal threat is gone. And Vincent will not be a problem," Alexander said. The flatness in it was complete, and she didn't ask for elaboration. "Ivy's mother," Sophia said. "Marco had people there by midnight. She's fine. She didn't even know she was being watched." He looked at Sophia. "What you did last night bringing Ivy downstairs, getting her to talk." He paused. "If you hadn't gone up those stairs when you heard that sound, if you'd called Marco first instead of moving—" "She wasn't going to hurt Lily," Sophia said. "You didn't know that when you went up the stairs." "No," Sophia admitted. "I didn't." He looked at her steadily. "That's what I mean," he said. The quiet between them was comfortable in a way that still surprised her slightly, given how they had started in a rainy yard in the floodlights, guns and accusations, and a dying child between them. The door to the bedroom opened, and Lily appeared in it, hair wrecked from sleep, dragging her blanket, blinking at the two of them with complete morning calm. "You're both here," she said, as if this were simply an observed fact. "We're both here," Sophia said. Lily climbed onto the cot and inserted herself between the blanket and Sophia's side with the complete territorial confidence of someone who has decided a space belongs to them. She looked at her father. "Did you sleep, Daddy?" "A little," Alexander said. He hadn't, and they both knew it, and Lily accepted this with the pragmatic grace of a child who has learned to take what's offered. Sophia slept, Lily reported. I could hear her from my room. Good, Alexander said. And he looked at Sophia over his daughter's head, and in that look was something that had been building across 11 days of a story that had started in a garbage bin in the rain, not resolved, not simple, not anything that fit neatly into a category, but real. Genuinely, unmistakably real. The look of two people who have been through something difficult together and have found on the other side of it that they trust each other, that they have in some way that neither of them entirely planned become necessary to each other. Sophia held his gaze for a moment and then looked down at Lily, who had closed her eyes again with the boneless contentment of a child who knows she is completely secure, and she thought this is what it cost. 11 years of disappearing. A rainy Thursday night, a garbage bin, a choice made in a fraction of a second when she could have set down the bag, looked away, told herself it wasn't her problem. She had not looked away. She had never been able to look away. That was the thing about her, that 11 years of invisibility had not managed to erase the part that looked at a small cold foot in the dark and moved toward it without hesitation. The part her mother had named and called a gift, and that Sophia had sometimes called a burden, because it was the part that always put her directly in the middle of things she could have simply walked around. She hadn't walked around this one. And Lily Romano was alive and breathing and warm and pressed against her side with the complete unself-conscious trust of a child who had decided Sophia was safe. And that was the whole answer to the question of whether it had been worth it. Tomas arrived at noon. He was 53 slight, with Elena's dark eyes and an older face, and when he walked into Alexander's study, and the two men looked at each other across 3 years of silence and grief and things that had gone unsaid, Sophia quietly took Lily's hand and led her out to the garden and let the door close behind them. Some conversations needed the space that other people's absence creates. Carver came to see her at 3 in the afternoon with a document that was 3 pages long and used a great deal of formal language to say something straightforward. Sophia Martinez was being offered a permanent position as Lily Romano's personal guardian and household security liaison, reporting directly to Alexander Romano, with a salary that made her stop reading for a moment and read that line again. Full benefits, a residence suite on the 3rd floor, a car, and one line at the bottom of the 2nd page that was not in the formal language of the rest of the document, which meant someone had added it separately, which meant she knew exactly who had added it. The line read, "This arrangement is made in recognition of the fact that Sophia Martinez saw what others missed, acted when others would not have, and told the truth when it would have been easier to stay invisible." She read that line 3 times. She folded the document in half. She looked at Carver, who was watching her with his assessing lawyer's eyes, and she said, "I'll need to make one change, which is the title," she said. "Guardian and Security Liaison is accurate, but it's going to make the other staff treat me like something between a bodyguard and a bureaucrat." She paused. "Lily calls me Sophia. That works. Whatever the official title is should reflect that I'm here for her, not for the position." Carver looked at her for a moment. Then he made a small notation on his copy. "I'll have it revised," he said. She called her mother that evening from the garden. Maria answered on the first ring, which meant she'd been waiting. "Tell me," her mother said. So Sophia told her. All of it, start to finish, the bin and the floodlights and the accusations and the study and Delia Marsh and Ivy in the corridor and Vincent and Tomas landing at noon and the document with the line at the bottom that she read 3 times. She told it the way she'd always told her mother things, plain and complete, no omissions, no softening. When she finished, her mother was quiet for a moment. "You didn't stay invisible," Maria said. "No," Sophia said. "I didn't." "Good." Her mother's voice was warm and certain and completely without surprise, as though this outcome had been available from the beginning and had only required Sophia to stop looking away from it. "When can I meet this little girl?" Sophia laughed. It surprised her, the realness of it coming up from somewhere that had been too compressed for too long. "Soon," she said. "I'll bring you." "And the father, Mama?" "I'm just asking." "You're not just asking anything," Sophia said. "You never just ask anything." Her mother laughed too, and for a moment they were just the two of them, same as they had always been, the Bridgeport apartment, and the 12:15 bus, and the coffee stain, and the leak under the sink receding slightly into the background of something new and larger, and still being written. "Be careful with your heart in that house," Maria said quietly when the laughing settled. "I will," Sophia said, "and be careful with theirs," her mother said. "They've both been hurt enough." Sophia stood in the garden in the late afternoon light and thought about a man who kept grief behind glass, and a little girl who grinned too big for her face and said, "You came back with her arms already out." And she thought about what it meant to be given a place in a world that had not originally been built with her in mind, and to decide consciously clearly, with full knowledge of the cost to stand in it anyway. "I know, Mama," she said. "I know." 3 months later, Lily Romano walked into Sophia's room at 7 in the morning, climbed onto the bed with both feet, and announced that she wanted to learn how to make pancakes, and that Sophia had to teach her, because Sophia was the best at everything. Alexander appeared in the doorway 30 seconds later, with the expression of a man who has learned that when his daughter makes announcements of this kind, it is best to simply follow the current. "Pancakes," he said. "Apparently," Sophia said. Lily was already off the bed and heading for the door blanket, still trailing behind her. "Come on," she said with the absolute confidence of a child who knows that the people who love her will follow. They followed. And in the kitchen of the Romano estate on an ordinary Tuesday morning, Sofia Martinez, who had spent 11 years learning how to disappear, stood at a stove teaching a 4-year-old how to flip a pancake with the little girl's father leaning against the counter, watching them both. And she understood with the clean and simple clarity of something that has been true for a long time and has finally been allowed to settle into its right place, that she was done disappearing. She was exactly where she was supposed to be, and she was never going to be invisible again.